So, of course, I knew that I had done nothing wrong, nothing illegal, and the work that I have commissioned is something that happens in DC every day. And there's nothing illegal about it. So with that confidence, I continued traveling. And then I think it was May 2018 even, maybe. It was May 2018 that I was again in DC for an investment conference that I co-hosted actually with General Jim Jones, who is the former national security advisor of President Obama. And I have no reservation whatsoever being there. So I was reading these articles in the media, and then a lawyer called me, and that lawyer said, "I think you might be indicted." And I said, "Are you crazy? For what?" He said, "Well, there's a certain spin on the story about your story, and I think you should go in and talk to the prosecutor." And I said, "Well, if you think that's a smart thing to do as a lawyer, I have nothing to hide. Why not?" So I went in and spoke to the FBI and the prosecutor. I explained them everything.
Pardon me. You went in and spoke with that lawyer, or just walked through the door on your own?
With that lawyer, but they gave me some sort of an agreement, which basically said, my lawyer was like, "Don't worry about going in because we're going to get you an agreement to make sure they cannot indict you for anything you say." And I was like, why would they indict me? I'm only going to tell the truth. And he said, "As long as you don't lie, you're not going to be indicted." Okay? But he said, "But if you want to admit to a crime, this gives you the opportunity to do so." And I was confused. I said, "Why would I want to admit to a crime that I didn't commit?" He said, "Well, if you've been a witness to a crime, something, for example, someone else did," well, of course, they're referring to General Flynn. So there was some, I don't want to call it pressure. Yeah, it was pressure. But again, I'm hesitant to talk because this is an interview and I don't want to, I'm being indicted.
I think everybody who understands what you're saying, right? Without having to say it explicitly.
So I went in with that agreement, and it looked to me like the people who were there were stand-up people. They were doing their job. They were asking me questions, and I felt that most of these questions were originated from stories they read in the media. And most of these stories I knew were fueled by the Gulenist PR machine. So they hated General Flynn because he had written a negative article about this Islamist imam. So from the beginning, they were fueling negative stories about him being an agent of Russia, blah, blah. Of course, the Clinton apparatus loved these stories. And in that setting, I almost thought these prosecutors and these FBI agents probably have their heart in the right place because, I believe in the United States and I could not imagine something other than that being happening. So I went in and told them the honest truth. But apparently they didn't like that story, and I got indicted.
That's amazing. I was not. It never occurred to me that there was a Gulenist connection between the Russiagate and the indictment of Flynn and so on. But it makes total sense because
they spend a lot of money on it.
Because one of the reasons that you found General Flynn to be an attractive partner was because he sees U.S.-Turkish relations, pretty much as I would, right? That Turkey's a very important ally of the United States. There's some distance that's grown between us. We have to work to bring us back together. And you knew him to have those views, right?
General Flynn actually did not like this movement. He did not like the government of Turkey in the past because of their alignment with this movement. And originally, he did not understand that the coup was masterminded by this Islamist group. That's something I asked him to investigate. And there was no pre-agreed outcome of that investigation. And they made that very clear to me, Bijan as well. They said, we want you to understand whether the government ends up hiring us or you hire us, we're never going to come out with a pre-agreed conclusion. We're going to do honest research, and we're going to tell you our conclusions. And I think General Flynn was surprised, although he knew a little bit about them already, with how much money they were getting from the U.S. taxpayers, and how much they were integrated into the Clinton machine. And he ended up writing an article saying that Fethullah Gulen is a terrorist and should be treated as such. I did not necessarily I did not commission that article. I did not like the full content of that article either, because he compared the Gulenists with another organization that I felt would resonate negatively in Turkey. And because of my association with General Flynn, and clearly I told the Turkish government that I'm doing this work, and I think you should be doing it. I'm doing it now, but I think you should hire them for a longer contract, etc. I did not like the idea of Mike Flynn writing something that the government of Turkey would not like. But they made it very clear to me, Bijan, that this was the general's viewpoint. He's going to write this. He did send the article to me 2 days ahead of time. But he said you can suggest some technical corrections. So if there's something you think is technically wrong, you can say that. But the problem is the article was not technically wrong. It was right on target, and I told him this. And he went ahead and published this on election day. So of course the Gulenists, they must have had a very rough day on election day because they bet on the wrong horse. They spent a lot of money on the Hillary campaign. So imagine you're this Islamist imam sitting in the Poconos Mountains. You spend millions of dollars on Hillary Clinton winning, and you wake up with an article from someone very close to the counter candidate that says you're a terrorist. Of course, you know that you are a terrorist. and you see throughout the day that actually Trump wins the election. So they went crazy. They went crazy, and they immediately started fueling. And this organization is very well known for spending money on PR. And the problem is, because they have all these American institutions helping them, and what I mean is 301Cs, supposedly nonprofits, foundations. So they have all these fronts in the United States. They have no obligation to register. So
I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop you there. Perhaps I want to stick on the Flynn story, if I may,
sure.
if we can. And maybe I could ask you to come back for another episode, and we'll talk actually in depth about the Gulenists. I mean, I think this would be a fantastic topic if you'd be willing.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Anytime.
Maybe even another episode, one on the Gulenists, and then one on your view of U.S.-Turkish relations. I would love to put that out before our viewers as well.
Great.
But let's go back to the Flynn story here. I want to just nail down a few things. You've said it, but I want to say it clearly. Did you ever take money? Did you ever serve as a pass-through for the Turkish government? Take money for the Turkish government and funnel it to Flynn?
Absolutely not.
Did you did you hire General Flynn at the orders or the suggestion of the Turkish government?
No, it was my suggestion that they hire him, but they didn't.
And you're what do you do normally?
Let me ask you a counter question. Did you ever receive money from the government of Turkey, Mike?
No, I never received any. I know
because Gulenists are saying that
all the time.
That you do.
I know. By the way, we'll talk about the Gulenists some other time. But once I started saying openly that I think that the U.S. has screwed up, has a lot of responsibility for the deterioration in U.S.-Turkish relations, right? And said a few negative things about the Gulenists. I felt the heat from this media operation that they have, and it startled me. It startled me.
Incredible.
It is a Dan Brown story, but we'll have a whole nother episode on that. It's amazing. But the answer to your question is never got a dime from the Turkish government. There's some guy on Twitter who keeps promising me some really great Iskender kebab next time I come to Turkey. I'm hoping to get that. I'll take that. But no.
During the trial of Bijan Kian, in which General Flynn was supposed to be a witness, Mike, and I think one of the things that caused the prosecution to really go crazy about Flynn is because he changed his lawyer to a proper lawyer. Now finally has good representation to Sidney Powell, and he did not testify in Bijan Kian's trial because what they wanted him to say was simply not true, and they came out and said it. So it's not me saying it. It's a 3-star general who served this country honorably in several capacities. President Obama appointed him to be director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, saying he was pressured to lie, and he refused to do that. He refused to do that. So his testimony did not come through in that trial. But during that trial, Kian's lawyers asked the FBI if they asked the government of Turkey to cooperate with a mutual legal assistance request, which means Turkey is a NATO country, it's an ally of the United States, and there's a treaty that allows both countries to ask for legal assistance in case they're involved in an investigation and they need the help of their ally. It turns out the prosecutor's office has not asked the government of Turkey to, for example, look into my bank accounts in Turkey. So if the government, if the prosecution is worried about me having paid money directly to Mike Flynn or me having received money from the government of Turkey, you would think that they would at least ask to get access into my Turkish bank accounts to be able to look at it. They did ask the Dutch, so the Dutch government was asked and cooperated, so they have all my Dutch banking details. This is my understanding from going through the transcripts of the trial. But apparently they did not ask the government of Turkey. Why not? So why not? I mean, if you're well-intentioned, you ask, and if the government of Turkey then refuses and says, we're not giving you access into this, then you could go into trial and say, you see, there's further proof that Akim Alpta can work for the government because they refuse us access into his accounts. The problem is, I think they know they would get access into my accounts. And the problem for them is they would probably run into exculpatory information. Again, all this stuff my lawyer told me not to say. So after this interview, Mike, I'm going to go to jail for not 35 years, but 50 years. But the problem is, it's true. I'm telling the truth. So what? I mean, if they look into my bank accounts and go back 20 years, they'll see that I never received a dime from any organization that is remotely linked to the government of Turkey.
So what is your business normally? What business are you in?
I'm mostly invested in real estate, and I had an aviation investment in Albuquerque, for example. So people know me for aviation and real estate. So, I think they knew if they looked into my accounts here in Turkey, they would see that I was telling the truth. And they were hesitant to do that because then they need to share this with the defense attorneys as well.
Okay, so just you said it before, but I also want to emphasize, especially since you brought up the fact that the Gulenists have relations in Clinton world. Your the kind of work that you ask General Flynn to do is very common in Washington. You mentioned Tony Podesta, right? This is this kind of thing happens all the time.
It's a very small budget and it's very common. It's not a lot of money for DC standards. I've paid a lot more to lawyers now because of this case than I ever paid to the Flynn Intel.
That's interesting. Are you willing to say how much money this has cost you for just legal fees?
Well, I still owe a lot of people a lot of legal fees. If I would pay everything, I would be out almost $2 million. And I've paid more than $1 million already. And I'll tell you what, and I hope that none of your viewers ever have to go through something like this. But if you're ever accused of a crime in the United States and you go to a proper law firm and you ask for an estimate of the cost, you know what the estimates are that I received, the range?
No.
It's between $5 million and $15 million.
Wow.
$5 million and $15 million. So even on the low end, it's $5 million. How many people can pay $5 million for their legal defense? So they say that the legal principle is that you're innocent until proven guilty. How it works in practice is they start punishing you immediately. The subpoenas go out, the indictment goes out. I mean, you lose your career, you lose your reputation because you get convicted by the media first, and then you lose your money. And because in the end, technically, you're a fugitive. In my situation, very few organizations and companies want to do business with you. So I was one of the most successful rising stars of the Turkish American business community, and here I am having this interview with you about legal costs. I mean, I don't know the extent to which people intended for this to happen on the prosecution side, but it's what they ended up doing to me, and I have to say it's not something I'm very easily willing to forget or forgive.
Well, there's I saw an article in the New York Times not long ago that said that something like, I may have the number wrong, 98% of all federal trials end in a plea bargain, rather than they don't actually go to federal cases end up in a plea bargain rather than going to court, and you can see why from what you're describing why that's the case.
Well, if you listen to General Flynn's lawyer, Sidney Powell, it took almost 3 years to finally get these documents. But they now have handwritten notes between FBI lawyers and FBI agents where they discussed the Flynn situation before he was indicted. And this is verbatim. At some point, one of them says, what is our goal here? Is it truth/admission? Or get him to lie, I repeat, get him to lie and get him fired. Now, I can tell you, if something like this happened in Turkey or in the Netherlands, everyone involved, including their superiors, would be immediately fired and prosecuted. It blows my mind that this thing is out in the open right now for at least 2-3 days and nothing yet happened. And also, I think, a lot of people that don't like President Trump, that don't like General Flynn, or they don't have to like me either, should be extremely worried about this. Every American needs the rule of law to work. And this is, this is not something it's not only unbecoming of the United States, it's something that very much contradicts what the United States has represented in the world, and it will undermine your credibility. When a U.S. ambassador goes to Turkey and starts talking about rule of law, I saw an article yesterday because of this case by a Turkish columnist who said, look, we're being constantly reprimanded by the U.S. ambassador. The two main things that the U.S. ambassador accuses Turkey of wrongdoing of, it's the media being not independent enough and the justice system not working properly. And he uses the Flynn case to actually argue that both U.S. media is not independent and the justice system is not working. So every American should be very, very worried about this.
I agree. It's very hard to, if you actually know all the facts in the case, it's very hard to defend the U.S. system against those accusations. One of the things that's come out now in those documents you mentioned is that the original pretext for going to interview General Flynn to get him to lie, in quotation marks, was that he violated the Logan Act, which is a non-law. It's a joke, but it's such a joke, the Logan Act, and it was officials told David Ignatius, columnist for the Washington Post, that they were worried, this is back in January of 2017, that they were worried that Flynn may have violated the Logan Act. And Ignatius dutifully presents that like a legitimate thing to be all concerned about. And at that time, our heads were all full of all this nonsense from the press of Russiagate and Trump having done a deal with Putin and all this. But the two things that are amazing here is one, once you're in the crosshairs of the FBI, for whatever reason, the only way they're going to make you say uncle, right? Because this is what you said, but they made up a violation. They made up not a violation of the law. They made up a law because the Logan Act is not a real law. Nobody's ever been
from 1799 or something. 1798.
I don't know. Anyone
prevents a U.S. citizen from getting engaged in official diplomas, something. But in the case, it's worse than you said, Mike. It's worse than you said. Not only they try to, get him on some law that has no validity today, but he actually did not even break that law. So even if you would prosecute him on the Logan Act, you couldn't prosecute him and that's the problem they had, because he was already acting as the incoming national security advisor. So it was during the transition that he spoke to the Russian ambassador. So he was already in an official capacity. So you can't even accuse him of breaking the Logan Act.
The most serious law that was violated in this whole episode. Let me just say this, and I want to get back to your story. But that leak to David Ignatius on I think it was January 12, 2017. My memory may be wrong. Was a leak that was based on an intercept of the Flynn-Kislyak conversation that the NSA did. Right? It is a felony to leak anything to do with top secret intelligence. And there's been absolutely no investigation of that leak, which of course was part of some orchestrated attempt to ensnare Flynn and get him to lie. Of course, he never lied anyway. But
and there's nothing in the transcript also. There's a funny thing about this, that the leak is a crime, but there was nothing in the leak that actually considered it a crime. So there's nothing that General Flynn said in that meeting that constitutes a crime. So he had no motivation to lie whatsoever to these FBI agents.
But the interesting thing here, though, is that, or the thing that I want to get to with you, is that once they get you in their crosshairs, I mean, the story we're being told now, which I find totally credible, is that they made all these indictments against Flynn, and then they threatened to prosecute his son, and they threatened to ruin him financially. So they've already destroyed his reputation. They put him before a mountain of legal fees, and he's going to go under financially, and they're going to destroy his family, or he pleads guilty to lying. So he pled guilty to lying, right?
Of course, we already knew it back then before the American public knew. So we knew what was going on because we were being indicted. And I'll tell you, as a foreigner who loves the United States, who travels a lot to the United States, who has investments in the United States, who's worked on the Hill and things like that, I found it difficult to believe what was happening. And when I discussed this with other people, they didn't believe me. So when I said, this is what I'm being asked to do, when I was screaming to my first lawyer, are you asking me to lie? Even in my own family, people have trouble believing it. So what I find strange is now that it's all out in the open, now that it's verifiable fact that this happens, I don't see the outrage. I mean, you see it on the Trump side of things, of course you see it. But I think mainstream media, even the people who don't like Trump, should be extremely outraged. And that's something that continues to surprise me.
There's two factors there. I know this because I from day one I said that this was a complete. I was going to use language I don't want to use either. But that it was complete nonsense.
They're going to put you in the cell next to me.
We'll have good conversations. But from day one, I've said it was nonsense, and the amount of eye rolling that I've gotten from smart people has been amazing. It's just amazing. And one person who is very savvy took me aside because I was tweeting, "This is nonsense. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. This is nonsense." And he took me aside and he counseled me not to do it. And I said, "Why? I'm right. I'm right." And he said, "Maybe." He said, "But look, they have got."
I'll tell you something I've never told anyone. I have not even told this to the prosecution because nobody asked me. But I'll tell you something. Someone I know, an old friend, an American friend who's worked in the U.S. government in important positions, called me doing this while I was still working with Flynn, and there was no indictment yet, there was no subpoena, there was nothing. He called me and he asked to meet with me, and he actually advised me. He said, "Stay clear of Flynn." And I said, "Why? Why?" And he said, "Just listen to me. You're a friend of mine. I like you. Just stay clear of him." And of course, that conversation we had looks very different to me right now.
Yeah. Well, what my friend said to me was, they have started this investigation. They're going to go through Trump's records like gangbusters. They're going to find something. And so, and when they find, that he has that he has unethical real estate dealings in Miami with Russian expats or whatever, and you're going to say, "I was right. There never was this collusion with Putin." That's not what anyone is going to remember. What they're going to remember is that you said you defended him, and he ends up being guilty. So in other words, a grenade is going to go off. It doesn't matter, Mike, that it wasn't the grenade that you were it wasn't matter that you were right, that it wasn't the grenade that everybody said it was. It's going to go off, and it's going to explode and hurt you. So the same thing. So
that's probably what my friend meant as well.
Yeah, that's
because he knew the American system better than me. He warned me against it. I mean, we could see this happening also with the Ken Starr investigation. That was also politicized, of course, with the Bill Clinton's situation. So I guess special counsel investigations are always politicized. That's the answer I get when I'm extremely outraged and I talk to American friends. But this is different. This is extremely different. This is not about the president who lied about an affair he had, and then the special counsel, going overboard. This is completely different. Here you have a situation of a movie that I've seen in Turkey. Many Turks will be able to explain this to you, because Turkish establishment in the past, Turkey was a very secular country, so you couldn't even get a job as a bureaucrat, definitely not as a soldier or police officer, if anyone in your family was wearing a headscarf. So when people with some sort of religious or conservative credentials were elected, the Turkish establishment, and when I say establishment, I mean media elite, security bureaucracy, without engaging in some sort of a weird conspiracy, they all mobilized automatically because they considered that to be a threat against national security. And the means justified the end. And, if they couldn't do it, they engaged in a coup. And Turkey has had several coup attempts in the past, successful ones. But if they were able to get this government to resign because of the pressure they put on them through the media and through the prosecution and all sorts of political parties were closed by prosecutors' offices and things like that, they preferred that. So I've seen this movie in the past, and I think there's a real analogy there between what happened in Turkey in the past, what's happening in the United States now. It's not the Ken Starr thing. It's not a special counsel acting, partisanship on his behalf. It's different. It's the establishment considering Trump to be a national security risk for the country. It's people like Peter Strzok and others. I promise myself not to name any names, who consider that anything they'll do to get rid of Trump, and of course to get rid of him, you first have to get rid of Flynn. Anything you do is okay. And I'll go out on a limb. I'll tell you that maybe they had good intentions. Maybe it's because they love their country. They think that's the right thing to do. I'm sure that's the case. But it's extremely slippery slope. It never works in the country's favor. You decide these things at the ballot. That's the place to decide who runs the country. And if you're not happy with the end result of the ballot, you sit down and wait till the next election. That's what they should have done. But instead, they tried to do something else.
Okay, so so what you're saying, it's very clear, but let's make it even clearer. There was a plot to bring down Trump. The plot to bring down Trump required bringing down Flynn. In order to bring down Flynn, they turned you into something that you're not. They made false accusations against you and indictments against you in order to create this political sense that the whole Trump team was somehow working for dark, nefarious foreign forces.
I'm collateral damage. If you go back in time and you look at my media presence in the United States or elsewhere in the world before this investigation started, everything was above board. I've lived in France. I've worked in law enforcement. I even worked in counterterrorism in Lyon and in other places. I worked in Dutch Parliament. I lived in France, in the United States, in Holland. I don't even have a parking ticket. There's no negative news story about me anywhere. So apparently, all of a sudden, I became this shadowy force. People writing stories about me being an enigma, me being engaged in kidnappings, all sorts of crazy stuff. So no, obviously, I was collateral damage. It's not about me. And I don't think that even the prosecutor, I don't know if we'll ever look each other in the eye. But if we do, I think he's going to have a hard time looking straight at me and saying that no matter that what I did was the problem. It's not what I did; it's who I did it with.